Hello children! This is a video that will give you an overview of questions you are going to ask yourselves while sourcing, as well as an example of how to source a document. So I'm going to be using an actual document that we'll use for Unit 1. Okay? So sourcing is one of our historical thinking skills. And basically, historical thinking is skills that we're using to evaluate and analyze sources in order to construct the most accurate depiction of history that we can. So sourcing is the first thing you're going to do anytime you look at any document that I give you. So some questions that you're going to ask yourself while you're sourcing is who wrote this? When was it written, and where was it written? And those are all questions you're going to ask yourself before you even read the document. So usually you can find these answers either at the beginning or the end of a document. And sometimes you have to do a little more digging than that, but usually you can find it pretty easily. Once you read the questions, once you read the document, you're going to answer the rest of the sourcing questions. So what is the author's perspective? Why was it written? And is it reliable? So this is referring to the trustworthiness of the source and if there's any bias. That's what you want to think about. So these are the things you should be able to identify as you're reading through a document and as it pertains to sourcing. So you're going to identify the author's position on the historical event, identify and evaluate the author's purpose in producing the document, hypothesize what the author will say before reading the document, and evaluate the source's trustworthiness by considering genre, audience, and purpose. And that's bias, like I said. And then I'll get to these prompts over here once we go through and analyze our document. So I'm going to be using the same document for the other videos as well. Sourcing will be an orange highlighter, the best color highlighter. So document A, this is just a document that has some black codes on it, and black codes were some laws that were passed mostly in the South to restrict the rights of free African American men and women, and this is in post-Civil War. Okay, so after the Civil War is over, blacks are free, thanks to Lincoln. Thanks, Lincoln. But they're not completely free because they have black codes in certain cities or states that are limiting freedoms for African Americans. So the first thing I'm going to ask myself when I look at this is, who wrote this? And it doesn't have an author. So what do? To answer that question, I'm looking at this box here. It says where the source is coming from and stuff. And this last sentence says, the example below of black codes comes from laws passed in Opelousas, Louisiana. I hope I'm saying that right. In 1865, immediately after the Civil War. So I'm just going to assume that this document is coming from lawmakers from Louisiana. So whoever is in charge of making laws in that town is the author of this document. And I'm going to assume, since we're in the South in 1865, that these are white men passing laws in Louisiana. Okay? So that's who wrote this. When was it written? Right here it says it's written in 1865. So where was it written? Opelousas, Louisiana. So I've already answered the first three questions very easily without even reading the document, right? So the next step is to actually read through the document, and then we will continue with our analysis. So 1, the first black code says, no Negro or freedman shall be allowed to come within the limits of the town of Opelousas without special permission from his employers, Whoever breaks this law will go to jail and work for 2 days on public streets or pay a fine of $5. And $5 was a lot back then, okay? That's not like you just paying $5. 2. No Negro or freedman should be permitted to rent or keep a house in town under any circumstances. No Negro or freedman shall live within the town who does not work for some white people or former owner. 3. No public meetings of Negroes or freedmen shall be allowed within the town. Kind of rude. 4. No freedman shall be allowed to carry firearms or any kind of weapons. No freedman shall sell or exchange any article of merchandise within the limits of Opelousas without permission in writing from his employer. And the last one is 5. Every Negro is to be in the service of or work for some white person or former owner. Okay, so let's go back to our questions now. We have read through it. So our first question after the read through is, what is the author's perspective? And just reading through this, I can tell that my assumption about the authors, the lawmakers, is probably correct. They probably are white men, because I can tell that their perspective is that freedmen are basically second-class citizens at this point, okay? And that's just based on different things in the document. So freedmen do not have the same rights as white people. They have to have special permission from their employers to go anywhere in the town. If they don't get permission, they have to pay a fine. They're not allowed to own property in the town, which means they're a second-class citizen. They can't live in the town unless they're working for a white person, which makes them not equal. Okay, so this document tells me the author thinks blacks are second-class citizens. Second, why was it written? I can assume that this was written to inform people of the law. So just like we have the Constitution, just like we have laws written out for towns, this is what that was for. So it's telling people this is the law. There will be a consequence if you break it. The last one, is it reliable? Why or why not? And when we're saying, is it reliable? I'm not saying, do you agree with this? Because I do not agree with anything in here, but I think it is a reliable source because it's depicting accurately what life was like for freedmen in Opelousas, Louisiana in 1865. This is a good source to show what the circumstances were like at that time. Okay? And it's reliable because it's a government document, because it is laws that were written out in a town. Okay? So now, if we're looking at the chart, we're going back to our prompts, and I'm going to answer these questions based on this document. So, I have them written down here already, and I'm just going to answer them. So, if I was asking you these questions on a worksheet or something like that, I would want you to phrase them in full sentences like this. Okay, and these are just some sentence stems that you can use to answer those questions. So when we're doing sourcing, we can say the author probably believes that, and we already answered this question, right? That freedmen, we'll use that technical term, are second-class citizens. And shouldn't be equal, to whites. I think the audience is, and we've already answered this as well, if we've done our work properly, we'll have answered that. I think the audience is citizens in Opelousas, Louisiana. Probably specifically Black citizens, but all citizens, okay? Based on the source information, I think the author might, and you can really take this any way you want to, couldn't you? So based on the source information, I think the author might be white men who are lawmakers, because it's not actually stated. So I'm going to say my assumption. Based on the source information, I think the author might be white men who are lawmakers, and who hold a prejudice against blacks. I do or don't trust this document because, and I do trust it. I think it's a good source. So I do trust this document because it is a government document that was written in the time period and accurately depicts life in the South at that time. Okay, and then you are done with that portion. So you're done with sourcing. And then you can move on to the other steps, which will be covered in future videos.